there's one list people will never agree on, it's the greatest muscle cars of all time. No other era in automotive history has given us so many legendary machines, each with its own devoted fan base. The truth is, most of them are spectacular, and the final choice often comes down to personal preference. This time, we turn to Reddit users, digging through countless discussions to find the most frequently mentioned models that enthusiasts consider the best. Stick around, some of these picks might just surprise you. Note that, out of respect for these automotive legends, there won't be a countdown. We believe it's better to list them in a completely random order. Let's begin. The year 1967 brought one of the most iconic muscle cars of all time, the Chevy Camaro SS. It represented Chevy's answer to the super popular Mustang, and it definitely was a better performer. Simply, it featured a more advanced chassis with better geometry. It was lighter, it had a wider track, and it had a lower center of gravity. Most importantly, there was no understeer like in Mustang's case. It simply was a better sports car. Of course, an important role belongs to the engine, and in the cases of the famous Super Sport trim, there were two options on offer. The Camaro was the first model to get the famous 350 V8, one of the best street engines of the era. But the top of the offer was reserved for the big block 396 V8, rated at 375 horsepower. Combined with a lightweight chassis, it made Camaro one of the best performers of its time. Besides excellent performance, the Camaro was famous for its recognizable styling, with sleek and aggressive design with a long hood and a short rear deck, as well as iconic details like rally stripes, power bulge hood, and all other unique features that turned it into a legend. The GTO is truly a remarkable car, a model that defined the muscle car era. This was the first model year as a standalone model, and it was the time when GTO got a stronger identity, with a sleeker design and iconic features like a Coke bottle shape, split grille, and lavoured taillights. But the GTO wasn't just a fancy-looking machine. It packed some serious power under the hood. The good old 389 V8 with 335 horsepower in the base version. The top of the offer was reserved for the so-called tri-power setup, with three two-barrel carburetors that raised output to 360 horsepower and an impressive 424 pound-feet of torque. The GTO was a real beast on the straight line, but it was also surprisingly good in corners for its size and weight. Of course, with 3,700 pounds, it wasn't exactly a pony car like Camaro or Mustang, but it featured the so-called heavy-duty suspension, with firmer springs and a larger sway bar, while the T-Track version was also equipped with a limited slip differential. Clearly, it was a complete car, with a significant cultural impact on further generations, let alone the commercial success, considering that Pontiac managed to sell nearly 100,000 units only in 1966. Simply, it was a perfect mix of raw power and aggressive styling, as well as a pretty impressive level of refinement, and apparently, the Reddit community is perfectly aware of its greatness. From what we managed to find out, most Reddit users think that the Boss 429 is the most iconic Mustang of all time. And why wouldn't they? As we are talking about one of the rarest variants with raw power and brilliant engineering. It's one of the most iconic muscle cars overall, designed to meet NASCAR modulation requirements. The core of its performance, as the name suggests, was the legendary 429 V8 with 375 horsepower and a monstrous 500 pound-feet of torque. But the 429 was much more than its engine and straight-line performance. It featured an upgraded chassis with a heavy-duty stabilizer bar, sport springs, and power disc brakes, which are way more capable than a regular Mustang. It was nimble and agile, but above anything else, it was incredibly stable at high speeds. Finally, let's not forget the styling, with so many iconic, exclusive details, starting from the unique front-end design, flared wheel arches, and hood scoop. We can talk a bit about the interior, about things like bucket seats and sporty instrumentation. Or maybe we should mention that only 859 units were ever produced. This clearly is one of the greatest icons among Mustangs, among all muscle cars. The beauty of Roadrunner is in its straightforward design. It's bold and stripped down, which made it an icon among enthusiasts who wanted no frills, just performance. There are no unnecessary luxury features, just pure power. The Roadrunner was cheap, but it was super capable, enough for a commercial success back in the day, enough for cult status among younger generations. The engine lineup was impressive, starting with a 383 V8 with 335 horsepower. Of course, the top of the offer was reserved for the iconic 426 Hemi, rated at 425 horsepower, which made it one of the most powerful cars back in the day. Straightforward design was followed by a straightforward chassis with a suspension setup that included torsion bars at the front and rear leaf springs. It was stable enough, but still primarily focused on straight-line performance. It was, and still is, one of the most beloved muscle cars of all time, cherished for its no-nonsense approach to performance and affordable prices, an ideal combo for a muscle car, some would say. While models like the Roadrunner were simple and straightforward, the Oldsmobile 442 was quite the opposite. It was one of the most refined muscle cars of the era, with a balanced chassis and impressive all-around performance. And the year 1968 is important in particular, as it was the year it was redesigned. It got a shorter wheelbase, rounded body lines, and split grille, but more importantly, its heavy-duty suspension was the thing that helped it stand out from the crowd. Upgraded suspension with boxed rear control arms, anti-roll bars on both ends, and power disc brakes are just some of the key features that help the 442 be more composed than the vast majority of muscle cars back in the day. And all that was complemented by an excellent V8 engine with a 4-barrel carburetor, 4-speed transmission, and dual exhaust. The max output was rated at 350 horsepower, but there was also a variant with upgraded cam and better air intakes, which would increase the power to 360 horsepower. No matter who you ask to make a list of the best muscle cars of all time, the Chevelle will always be included, because it's one of the most legendary muscle cars of all time, a model famous for longevity and some really crazy variants, like the SS 454. Back in 1970, the Chevelle was an established force on the market, but Chevy wanted to take a further step forward and took things to the extreme with the introduction of a new LS6 engine. This 454 V8 was good for an impressive 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque, and it was the most powerful production engine of the era. Combined with a 4-speed manual or a TH400 automatic, it was a street-legal monster able to complete a quarter mile in a low 13-second range. But this Chevelle was much more than performance. We love it because of those legendary dual racing stripes, cowl induction hood, bold SS badging, and other famous details. Under the skin, the 454 was characterized by serious chassis upgrades, like reinforced suspension, power front disc brakes, and heavy-duty rear axle, which altogether provided better stability and made Chevelle much more than a straight-line rocket. On top of that, it was quite a luxurious car, with bucket seats, horseshoe shifter, upgraded gauges, and other cockpit details that followed the car's high-performance nature. Simply, it was a total package, a car that symbolizes the golden era of the American automotive industry like nothing else. Can a list of legendary muscle cars be complete without a Dodge Charger? Of course, it can't. Everyone knows that, including Reddit users who picked the iconic 1968 Charger 426 as the most prominent one. That year, we saw a complete redesign, which brought the now legendary Coke bottle body. The recessed grille and, of course, hidden headlights made the Charger one of the most distinctive muscle cars of all time, which cemented its status as a pop icon through various movies, including the one and only Bullitt. The 426 was equipped with the legendary Hemi engine, with 4-barrel carburetors, forged internals, and massive hemispherical combustion chambers. Besides wonderful exhaust notes, this engine also offered an impressive output of 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, turning the Charger into a drag monster with a quarter-mile time in the low to mid-13 seconds. But the Charger still was pretty engaging to drive, with sporty handling and a driver-focused cockpit. We are not sure what's more impressive, its performance or its unique presence, but we know for sure it's one of the greatest of all time. With shaker hood scoop, bold RT striping, wide stance, and those round headlights, the Challenger is one of the best-looking muscle cars of all time, and the exterior itself is enough to earn a place on this list. But it was much more than that. Under the hood, the RT was, just like the Charger, equipped with a Hemi 426, with a max output of 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. And since the Challenger was smaller and lighter, it was even quicker than the Charger, with a quarter-mile time in the low 13-second range. Built on the same chassis as the Charger, the Challenger wasn't the smallest and lightest pony around. It wasn't as nimble as the Camaro or Mustang, but it was no slouch either, thanks to heavy-duty suspension, front sway bar, and optional disc brakes. Reddit users love it because it blended style and performance like no other muscle car, especially if we add memorable interior features to the equation, such as the iconic pistol grip shifter introduced in 1970. Although it didn't come even close to its sibling, the iconic Ford Mustang, in terms of commercial success, the Cougar Eliminator holds a special place in the hearts of not just Reddit users, but pretty much every muscle car lover, because it was a little bit different kind of muscle car compared to other models on the list. Yes, it had a massive V8 under the hood, and it shared most of the parts with Mustang, but at the same time, it was refined and pretty luxurious. Its interior stood out in particular with high back bucket seats, a center console, fancy gauges, and a pretty impressive selection of materials. The exterior also appointed lots of unique styling details, including blacked out grille, bold side stripes, front and rear spoilers, and even an optional Ram Air hood scoop. It was one of the most unique looking models on the market, which also offered some pretty solid powertrain options. The most feared, of course, was the version with the 428 Cobra jet. But just like the Mustang, it was also offered with a high-revving 302 small block V8 that turned out to be an excellent choice for handling and racing. The Cougar Eliminator featured a balanced chassis, and it was pretty much capable in every way. But its ability to blend that performance with style and refinement is what made it such a legend, an unsung hero, as some hardcore fans like to say. The Barracuda remained one of the biggest what-ifs in the muscle car history up to these days. Simply, it entered the game too late, right before the oil crisis, so there wasn't enough time to spread its wings and show its full potential. Still, its impressive performance plus iconic styling were enough to cement its status as one of the biggest muscle cars of all time. It was available with the 425 horsepower Hemi engine, and due to the fact that it was shorter and lighter than the Challenger, it was actually pretty good in terms of handling and overall athleticism. And all that would come mixed with unparalleled styling, with a split grille, quad headlamps, and distinctive gills on the front fenders. On the inside, famous shaker hood scoop, pistol grip shifter, high back bucket seats. The 1971 Cuda had it all, and that's why it's one of the most sought after and valuable muscle cars in history. This is what Reddit users said about the top 10 muscle cars of all time. Do you agree with them? What about overrated muscle cars? Can you find one on this list? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.